Welcome to another edition of the Highland Park Update Schools Edition. My name is Matthew Hirsch from the Highland Park Public Information Committee. Once again, we are honored to welcome Dr. Scott Taylor, Superintendent of the Highland Park Public Schools. Just generally, how are your first few months going?
Thrilling. It's been a good fit so far. I think my knowledge base of the town, having been here for over 21 years, has helped me quite a bit. I recognize what people want, what their concerns are, and I, as I'll discuss a little bit later, have been trying to do what a lot of folks in the community have wanted, and that's feel engaged with their school district. So that's been my recent push.
Right, and we've seen evidence of that. You know, as residents, we've seen evidence of that through your Honeywell alerts, through the emails, through the social media presence. I guess maybe a little bit. You know, how else is that approach manifesting itself?
So there are two venues I'm going to leverage to consistently obtain input from parents, members of the local business community, and civic leaders. One is a steering committee of about 12 folks who I'm going to have help me begin the strategic planning process. That'll kick off in April. I'll be putting a call out to the community and looking for as many people who want to volunteer, about 3 days of their time as are out there, to help us identify aspirations for our school district, the things that we want to see us become in the next 5 years. Those volunteers will also identify goals to get us to those dreams that we have, and then action plans, very concrete action plans that I can implement starting in September 1. The second opportunity people in town will have to have a say in decisions that we make here in the school district is through the Superintendent Community Advisory Committee. So far I have 31 people who've come out to be part of that group. And so what I've done is split them into two groups. One group of mostly parents who will focus on curriculum and instruction, and another group that will focus on facilities, safety, and technology. We'll start meeting in late January at night, and I expect I'll have about 3 meetings with each group. Those people will identify immediate concerns, things that our strategic plan can't address in the long term, but that need to be tackled right now. Then I can take those immediate concerns, come back to my leadership team and my faculty, and try to nail them one by one.
Can we talk about such as, or are there any?
Sure. So there might be things I'm not aware of that are of concern. For instance, our lunch operation, quality of the food, how much time it takes our kids to get their lunch, especially at the middle and high school, particularly at the high school, where we tend to have long lines. So perhaps parents will, at one of these committee meetings, identify that as an issue. That's something which I think I can address quickly by working with our food services provider, my leadership team. Parents might want us to be addressing homework policy, you know, on a greater scale. I know that has been a critical issue discussed in the past. While I think that's going to be a long-term topic that we look at through strategic planning, might be some short-term things I can do right now to address homework concerns.
That's great. Obviously, in the first few months, you've become aware of some of the more pressing issues that the district is facing. What are some of the hot-button issues that you're dealing with right now?
So immediately upon coming to the school district, I was made aware that our school liaison officer was in our building, and we hadn't had a clear set of goals, roles, and responsibilities for the Officer Joe Cabello, who has been doing a wonderful job working with our students so far. What I did do is meet with the mayor, council president, some other members of the council, parents, local president of the NAACP chapter right here in New Brunswick, members of HP POSOC, parents of students of color, to hear their concerns and get a feel for what they see as what the role and responsibility of the school liaison liaison officer should be. So after then meeting with the chief of police and Officer Cabello, we decided to take a few steps back before we can take a few steps forward, I hope next year. So right now, Officer Cabello's primary role is going to be to teach classes during the year, and he'll be invited to various social events that our leadership team would like him to be present for.
And so, what was what was the arrangement before? He would be in he would be in the buildings.
He would be in the building, and he was doing such a nice job developing relationships with our students. But because his role wasn't defined, he'd be walking the halls, popping in and out of meetings from time to time, being very unobtrusive. But we wanted to put more of a focus on those walkthroughs that he was doing, which is why we decided to, for now, limit his time in the school to working in the classroom formally for lessons that the teachers might implement that they could use him to help with. But I have to say, our kids have taken to Officer Cabello. He's taken to them. I do see a very nice future ahead for our work with local police.
Sure. No, clearly he is good with the students and has had a positive role. How does this new how does this refining of his role, how has that been received by folks?
Well, I think people recognize that when you hurry something, like I believe this relationship was tended to back in May, it doesn't come off as effectively as it could than if you take it slowly and steadily and methodically. Between now and next school year, I'll be working closely with the chief, with the mayor, HP POSOC, and other constituents to see how we could potentially expand his role. But we're going to do it carefully, and of course make sure that I have all the stakeholders' input to do it, so that that relationship represents what we as a community want.
Right. Speaking of town stakeholders, we were talking about before we started that you've been going to various meetings and functions around town, just in your role as superintendent, that aren't specifically related to the schools, like with a library board meeting, for example. But what are you hearing from some of these various organizations, and how are they? And I'm sure they're happy to see you attending them. But what's your overall sense?
I'm feeling and hearing that morale in our community is improving. I think I have to thank my predecessor, Israel Soto, for having started us on that path. He did a wonderful job settling things down and getting us more to a comfortable place. I'm hearing that's only expanding, that feeling that our school district can be world-class because we have all the right raw materials we need, as I pointed out in the most recent edition of the Highland Park News. So I'm hearing that, and I'm also hearing a want for more involvement. I think now that people in our community feel that the doors are opening more, that there's more transparency, that we're building even closer relationships between the school district and the community, that there's now more of a place for all of the major assets we have in this community. The folks who work at Rutgers, the other business professionals here in town, the people who have expertise that we're not even aware of, feel like they can now contribute. And they have. I've been getting calls left and right from people who want to have meetings with me to talk about how they can contribute, volunteer their time and their expertise.
That's great. As somebody who works to cultivate volunteers, and I think anybody who tries to increase volunteer bandwidth, that's terrific news. One of the other issues that the district has been focusing on is discipline policy, and that's been an issue at several board meetings the last month or so. Can you give an overview on what's being discussed?
I have to thank parents who are very involved with the Highland Park Parents of Students of Color for raising the flag that I think needs to be raised, and that is the potential that we are not being culturally responsive enough to the different groups of kids we have, represent different ethnicities, cultures, race, religions, when it comes to disciplining or responding to kids who act out, who are disruptive, or worse, get involved in fights and other more severe issues. So thanks to HP POSOC, we being the school district, including our database specialist, have taken a look at 3.5 years worth of discipline data that we've compiled. We broke it down by subgroup, including special education. And then we took a look at the proportion of student representation in these subgroups to the larger student population. You know, what percentage of blacks, Hispanics, special ed students, whites, Asians do we have in each school, versus what we looked at, what percentage or what frequency are these students being disciplined in relation to how they represent their subgroup in the larger population. Is there a correlation? Is there a problem here that we see? We only have, let's say, 10% of our students representing black subgroup in one of our schools, yet they represent 50% of our discipline cases. So we're looking at that data, and my leadership team and I have already had discussions about the stories behind the data. What I think will come out of this, ultimately, is a change in our discipline policy. It could result in some training of our staff, including our leadership team. It might include a revamp, a codification of the way we actually respond to certain incidences. So instead of suspending a child out of school for a certain infraction, we might do this instead. So I think this is going to, this data review, thanks to the initiation by groups like HP POSOC, I think is going to have a very large impact on how we do things in general when it comes to working with kids who act out.
That's terrific. And you know, what are some of the, so not to ask a silly question, but you know, what are some of the long-term effects of taking that approach? Obviously, there's a long-term benefit on the student by taking a long-term approach. Absolutely. When it comes to discipline. What are the outcomes?
Well, there's an approach that a lot of folks are taking, including in schools, called restorative justice, to working with kids who are consistently targeted for being behavior problems. You know, these are the kids who we identify have a long record, disciplinary record in our schools. What could very well come out of this process is a plan to change the students' behaviors so they recognize that what they're doing is disruptive or not appropriate. Not only that they recognize that those are disruptive or inappropriate behaviors in the school setting, but that when they leave us, those same behaviors might be disruptive and inappropriate in the workplace or in society. So the long-term impact this whole process in which we're engaging could have is to improve students' place in our society and in getting along in their workplace as well.
That's terrific. You are, you know, you're starting to focus more on, not more, but we've been hearing more of a focus on student achievement.
So, you know, I've been here 2.5 months, and I feel like I've been able to triage a whole lot. There were a lot of fires I had to put out. I had to make a couple of big hires, including our new Director of Educational Services. I want to stabilize that department. So I feel like now I'm prepared to start laying out my vision for student achievement, student social, emotional, and academic achievement. So one thing the community is going to hear more about is my mantra that we should all be looking at the story of a child from pre-K all the way to senior year of high school. We can't look at kids in isolation from one grade to another or one subject area to another. We need to take a very big picture look at how we're working with our children all the way from the time they set foot in the door as 3, 4, and 5-year-olds to the time they leave us as 18 and 19-year-olds. From looking at that global outlook of a child's progression through our schools, we'll then focus on the things we need to do to meet each child's needs. at that child's place. Those learning needs, those social and emotional needs that those specific kids have, we will need to address on individual levels. And that'll mean doing things like differentiating instruction on a much more effective level than we may be doing now. That means considering infusing more project-based learning in our program. Get kids at the center of the learning experience so that there's more balance in a class, even at the high school level. I want to be able to walk into a classroom and see learning chaos. I want to see kids constantly doing, making, creating, applying. And we'll also be looking at how we assess our students, how we measure their progress. Is it authentic or not? Standardized tests are one measure, but only one measure of a child's progress. I'd like to see us incorporate demonstration assessment. Let's let kids act out their knowledge base. So the community, from the school level on out to the greater Highland Park community, is going to be hearing more about those things. And I'll be integrating my vision, of course, with the strategic plan so that they're working together in synergy.
Wow, so that approach is not necessarily something that maybe we're accustomed to. How does that shape itself over the long term?
Well, first of all, as you point out, it's a long-term process because it means changing the culture when it comes to the way we think about how kids learn and how they express their progress. So I anticipate it's going to take an awful lot of professional development for our teachers and for our parents as well. It might mean altering everything from the school day to our report cards, how we report out how our students are progressing. I also believe that when we change that culture, and this might take a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road, what we're going to see are happier people, happier children, happier young adults. I want my parents and my teachers to walk through the school halls and the classrooms and see kids smiling, enjoying school. I want them to wake up and embrace learning and find a passion for that. I think we need to get to that place. And I think this community is ripe for that.
You mentioned your article in the Highland Park Borough newsletter, and in that article you talked about some of the raw materials that you can use as cornerstones for your long-term vision. Maybe talk about some of those and how you hope to see them grow over the long term.
Sure. So I talked about my vision for instruction, and I'll be talking more about that in the next year. I do see the community adding a lot of value to helping me realize and helping the district realize that instructional vision. For instance, Mary Curran, who is the director of the Rutgers University Teacher Preparation Program, I think has a lot to offer us in the area of instruction. I can see, for instance, our work in the area of differentiated instruction being supported heavily by some of the experts at the Graduate School of Education. We don't have to go too far outside our region to find great staff developers to support our efforts. I've had numerous individuals from, of all places, the Rutgers Science Departments offer their services. Well, if we're going to shift from a more traditional approach to teaching to a more constructivist approach, more student-centered approach, to project-based learning and demonstration assessment, I could use the input from some of the science education experts at Rutgers to train our teachers, to help them promote more of that hands-on learning experience atmosphere. So I can go on and on and on, but I do see the community contributing quite a bit to helping me fulfill my vision.
I think that's a good place to close, and it sounds like you've got your work cut out for you, but that you are ready to do that and also engage the community. I would encourage anybody watching, as I'm sure Dr. Taylor would, to attend Board of Ed meetings on Mondays, and you can check the schedule at www.hpschools.net. Follow the school district on Facebook at Highland Park Public Schools, and you're also on Twitter and Instagram. Is that correct? You can find them there. And on the please follow the Borough of Highland Park at www.hpborough.com, and the Borough is also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you so much, Dr. Taylor.
It's a pleasure.
We appreciate it as always, and we look forward to the next time. Thank you. Good night.